Hey BC, how's it going? I thought today it'd be a good idea to pay tribute to the turntable. I mean, where would we be as record collectors without our turntables, our record players? Unless you're one of those strange record collectors who doesn't actually own a turntable. Never quite got that. Um, but it got me thinking about all the album sleeves which have pictures or representations of turntables on them. And I thought there must be thousands of them. I thought, yeah, I'll show a few of those. And I couldn't think of that many. I'm probably missing a few in my collection, but be interesting to see what sleeves you guys can come up with. Perhaps do your own video on this subject or just leave a comment. But I dug out the ones I can think of, and I've started with ones which show where it all started with the gramophone. And this is the album by Dada, which featured Elkie Brooks on vocals and a guy that I mentioned in one of my previous videos, Paul Corder. And this is a decent album, sort of progressive horn rock with some minor psych tinges, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, there's a track, Jasmine, which gets kind of floaty and a bit trippy. So it's well worth checking out. And some of these albums, I must admit, I haven't played in a while. So digging them out just for the sleeve art has made me think I need to revisit them. So there you go, first gramophone picture. Then in a similar style, we have the Alan Bone album. I think this is called Listen. Was it just called Alan Bone? No, it's called Listen. Again, pretty standard picture of a gramophone. And this is a really interesting album, actually. Alan Bone started out, I think, in the John Barry 7. He was in Jonesy, who are more of a sort of progressive hard rock type of band. And he plays trumpet, I should say. And this album is kind of a mix of, well, it starts off sounding a bit like a kind of Faces style, piano-led, barroom rock band, I guess. But then it gets progressively or steadily more progressive. And you get organ and horns in here. And yeah, it's an interesting listen. Again, not listened to it for a while, so I'm looking forward to giving this one another spin. There's a guy on here, Gordon Neville, on vocals, who's got a very gravelly sort of voice, which is, I don't know, I guess that's where I get the Faces kind of link from. It's got that kind of a style of voice. Some really good music on here. The track Pyramid, I seem to remember, is particularly good. And a track called Forever, which has some real echoey sort of trumpet, a bit like the effect that Miles Davis put on his trumpet on Bitches Brew. So that's a good starting point if you want to check this album out. So the Alan Bone. Then the final one for gramophones is Griffin's fourth LP, Rain Dance, or Rain Dances. No, Rain Dance. And this gets a bit of stick for abandoning their kind of medieval sounding folk prog roots, I suppose. But to be honest, the further they move from that sound, the more I like them. There's still elements of that on here. There's bassoon and crumhorn, whatever a crumhorn is. But this one is definitely an album that would appeal to fans of Caravan, Genesis, Gentle Giant, those kind of bands. A bit of a Canterbury feel to it, I suppose. They haven't dumbed down as far as I'm concerned. It's still a very interesting progressive album. Some of it's instrumental. I think the first two tracks from memory are instrumental. What are they? Down the Dog and Rain Dance. And then the vocals come in. On the third track, which is a Beatles cover, I think, Mother Nature's Son. Yeah, they do a decent job of that. Yeah, so there's kind of still a medieval elements to this, but they're stretching out a bit, becoming, I guess, more commercial, but I don't suppose it saw a huge increase in sales for them, but don't sleep on that one if you see it. Then I started finding albums which featured the kind of record player I was talking about in my last video, where I was talking about probably my most played album was the Grease soundtrack, when I had a turntable which looked like a picnic hamper. I guess a bit like the kind of Crossley type record players you get now, only probably better quality, to be honest. Certainly better built. And this thing was, heavy duty wood covered in sticky back plastic. But you get your kind of, I suppose they're called record changers, as featured in this Rock Roots series. This is the Genesis one. I've got a Procol Harum one as well, and I think the pictures are all pretty similar. They all seem to have this record changer there with the thing for sort of stacking your records above the platter, so that when you finish one, next one just drops down and destroys the record underneath, which is why so many records that you buy that date back to the 60s are in such a pitiful condition, because they're rubbing against each other, dropping on each other, and probably being left on the turntable for weeks on end, gathering dust and grit. But this is this Rock Roots album, this Genesis album, is basically their debut album with a couple of singles on here. Or is it? Yeah, the first two singles, I think. The A and B sides of those, which, apart from on the singles, at the time this came out, you couldn't get them anywhere else. So you've got the From Genesis to Revelation album and the first couple of singles on here. And revisiting this, I really enjoyed it. It's much better than I remembered. They're definitely more in that sort of Bee Gees style Baroque pop sort of sound, but Peter Gabriel's voice is really, it's really recognisable. He's already knocking it out of the park on this one. I think he's really got an identity in his vocals already. So yeah, this is certainly was when I bought this years ago. It was a very cheap and easy way to get the first Genesis album. And I'm sure you can still pick this up for next to nothing. Then the next one to feature one of those record changers is Sweet's Hits. And if you're a casual Sweet fan, this is probably the only album you'd need by them. It's got the early stuff like Papa Joe, Little Willie, Wigwam Bam. And it's got the big hits, Blockbuster, Hellraiser, Boring Blitz, Teenage Rampage, Fox on the Run, and it finishes with Love is Like Oxygen, which is a song I love. So yes, it's a great compilation. I do have pretty much all the Sweets albums as well, but if you just fancy a hit, a sugar rush, if you like, of all the hits in one go, this is a great place to start. And great picture of a record changer there. And then continuing the theme of Gary Moore's Still Got the Blues, a young Gary, or someone pretending to be a young Gary, pictured with a record changer there, playing along to it with his Les Paul. And I guess that was a feature of the 60s. That's what people who grew up in the 60s, that was their experience of playing records. That's a kind of turntable. They weren't even called turntables then, they were just called record players, weren't they? It's the kind of thing you'd have. Then we move on a little bit. And we have something called a Magnavox, and it's quite hard to see in this picture. It's on R.A. Speedwagon's High Infidelity album, which is probably their biggest album, I think, in terms of hits. Keep on Loving You, and what was the other big hit on here? Take It on the Run. Pretty schmaltzy, not very heavy. At the time I hated it. Picked this up a few years back and thought, actually, time's been reasonably kind to this album. It's a decent listen. But yeah, in the sort of murk of that picture, there is a Magnavox record player on the back. You can see it more easily there. And it looks kind of like some sort of cupboard. I don't know whether that's a built-in speaker. I guess it is on the front there. But I've seen these being sold online now with the original record player torn out of them, and people are using them to put their Crosleys in and just have it as a sort of retro-looking piece of furniture. So there you go, there's your Magnavox. Then I get on to what I'd call abstract representations of record players. In other words, pictures that aren't really of record players, but that's kind of, well, you'll see what I mean. That's what the cover art is trying to depict. The obvious one came to mind was Let It Bleed, with, again, kind of record change with the sort of stacked records, except here it's a film canister and cake and a tyre and that kind of thing, and the tone arm coming across. So Stones' Let It Bleed, fantastic album. Not my favourite Stones album, but it's probably got my favourite Stones track on it. Gimme Shelter. Never tire of hearing that song. And this is an original UK pressing, I think. On that Decca label. Don't know if it's the first pressing. Perhaps the originals had an unboxed Decca logo. I forget. But certainly an early press. And then this is a piece of cover art I always loved. Status Quo's If You Can't Stand the Heat, which uses an electric hob ring as a turntable with a tone arm going across. And little touches like the fact that it's like opens up like a matchbook and one corner of a sleeve is sort of burnt away. But yeah, I also it's a fantastic piece of sleeve art. The album's not so great. Has its moments. Again and again was a big hit. Was a decent song on here, probably the best thing on here. But this followed Rockin' All Over the World, which was a little bit of a decline in standard for Status Quo. They'd started to get poppier, and the sort of relentless heads down riffs were getting a bit thin on the ground. I mean, it's still an okay listen, but definitely they'd lost something special by the time this album came out. But the sleeve art makes up for it almost. That's just such a cool image. And if that's not abstract enough for you, what about this one? It's just a rose and a thorn being used as a tone arm on a record. Straubs, deep cuts. This is a vaguely proggy album. But it's basically folk pop rock. There's some heavy guitar on My Friend Peter. That's got a decent riff on it. And The Soldier's Tale has a sort of proggy, epic feel to it. But it's one of those albums doesn't quite settle in one style. So it loses points for that. But yeah, nice little representation of abstract representation of a record player there. Then this one's one of my favourites. Jethro Tull's Songs from the Wood. And it's on the back of the sleeve. You have this kind of felled tree and what remained of the stump. Someone's just stuck that's actually an SME 3009 tone arm. I know that because I've got a couple of those on a couple of my turntables. Classic tone arm. And Songs from the Wood. I mean, you kind of see what they did there. Playing songs from this piece of wood. Fantastic album. This is the period when Tull were sort of doing their more folky sort of era of music, I guess. Really enjoy this record. And it inspired another band. Only got this on CD. I'm surprised actually I've even got the CD, but Jurassic 5 and their Quality Control album. And on the back, they're kind of stealing Jethro Tull's idea there. They don't have an SME 3009. That looks like the tone arm off a SL 1200. Could be wrong. But yeah, compare and contrast. Now, this got me thinking that considering that we all love our turntables, you play your records on turntables. At the time most of these albums came out, that was really the only option apart from 8 tracks or cassettes. But it don't seem to me to be that many record sleeves depicting turntables, certainly not as many as I was expecting. Whereas if you look at hip-hop albums, dance albums, there are turntables all over those. I think it's because the kind of totemic, iconic object that was lusted after in rock was the guitar. The tool, if you like, that made DJs stars and made dance acts happen was the turntable of the twin decks. So I guess that's why you get so many guitars on album covers but not many turntables. So I'd really like you to dig through your collections and see what turntable pictures you can find on record sleeves. Forget the dance music, there's going to be millions of those and they're not going to be very interesting. But if you can find any on rock or jazz albums, that would be great. And if you do your own video, even better. So, where are we going with this now? Oh yeah, we've got Kansas Audio Visions. And on the back here, you've got some slightly crazed looking DJ. Well, it looks like a DJ, but he's got this turntable built into a TV unit. And I don't know whether anything like that was ever actually manufactured. Fairly horrendous idea. But yeah, so there you go. There's that one. And then we've got some more, I guess, more realistic pictures of turntables. Half Breed. I think I'm just called Half Breed, yeah. And that looks very much like a Garrard turntable to me, which was the kind of thing it featured in pretty much every one of those, what were they called? Gramophones. My parents had a gramophone in the 70s, and it was like this great big sideboard the size of a coffin with a speaker built in the front. I suppose a bit like that Magnavox, but bigger and longer. And yeah, always seem to have these Garrard turntables built in. Don't remember them being fantastic, but yeah, again, probably still better than the cheap turntables you pick up now. And there's a interior view of the record player. So yeah, Half Breed. I don't remember a lot about this. The logo created by Rodney Matthews. Fairly typical of his organic sort of style, I guess. And next up, we've got Donald Fagen's The Night Fly, where he's kind of posing as, I guess, a late night DJ. So he's got, I don't know what model that is, but that's one of those sort of broadcast turntables, sort of thing the BBC would have used. Looks like a decent turn. If anyone can identify that turntable, I'd like to know what it is, because it looks fairly decent. But this is a really good album. I wouldn't say it's as good as Steely Dan's material, but it's not a million miles away, and it's very much in that style. And you get some, great sidemen on this album. He's got Larry Carlton, Dean Parks, Steve Kahn all playing guitar, Jeff Porcaro on drums from Toto. So yeah, if you have got all the Steely Dan albums and don't own this, this is the logical next step. Really decent album. Then here's one that's, I didn't realise for ages there's actually a turntable on here, and you may struggle to see it, but it looks to me like that is a Technics SL1200. So your typical DJ turntable, although they're not really DJ turntables, they were just adopted by DJs. I own one, and it's a fantastic turntable. It's bomb-proof. Timing is amazing. It's hugely adaptable. I've had cats jump on top of it while it's playing, and it hasn't missed a beat. It's just so heavyweight and so sturdy. And this is a brilliant album. My favourite Elliott Smith album by a mile, possibly because it's the one I've played the most and most familiar with. But yeah, you can't go wrong with Elliott Smith, you really can't. Strikes me, even though he gets adopted by the indie crowd and the alternative crowd, but to me this is almost a power pop album. Baby Britain's got real sort of jangly Beatle-esque guitar riff on it. It's a dark power pop record, this one. A question mark, Amity, very much a power pop song to me. And the final track, I Didn't Understand, is just packed with lush Beach Boys style harmonies. So there you go, Technics SL1200. And finally, my favourite artwork featuring a turntable or elements of a turntable has got to be this one. Sweets Off the Record. And you've got like a close-up of a stylus tracking a groove there. On the back, you've got the little dust brush and roller. And inside the gatefold, got an expanded view of the whole tone arm there. So Sweet, the only band to feature twice in this little video. This is a really good album as well. Really, really good listen. We've got Lost Angels on here, which is superb. Windy City. It's a later album. This is 77, so it's past the time when they were guaranteed hit singles, to be honest. But their later material is really, really good. They had a bit more freedom to record the sort of music they wanted to do. Didn't always get it right, but there's some great heavy songs on here. Those, I was going to say Queen-style harmonies, but I think Sweet claim that Queen ripped them off, and they probably got a point, to be honest. So yeah, this is one worth checking out. So there you go. That's my little selection. All I could find. They're all the records I could find with turntables on. So let me have your comments. Post your own video if you can find anything to show. And take care, and I'll see you soon.